Shy delivery woman's amazing advice revealed a hidden strategy that saved a $5 million deal. Sarah adjusted the straps of the heavy delivery bag slung over her shoulder as she approached the sleek glass building of the architecture firm. The weight felt familiar, a daily reminder of responsibilities, bills to pay, her father's increasing needs, but today, it also bore the shivering possibility of change. She paused, inhaling the faint scent of polished wood and urgent ambition wafting through the air as she stepped inside. The reception area bustled with staff members clad in designer suits, animated discussions tumbling from their lips. An unmissable tension hung thick, like a palpable charge before a storm. She'd seen this dynamic in the eyes of her ailing father when the hospital bills piled high, that familiar unease, the pressure to perform becoming suffocating. But this time, it felt different, the stakes loomed larger. She carried packages, not just dreams. As she rounded the corner, Sarah caught snippets of a fierce debate flowing from a conference room. A $5 million deal teetered on the brink of collapse, a topic of importance leaping from the mouths of people who grew up in a world that saw them, that recognized their potential. But Sarah had learned to remain in the shadows, whispered lessons from her grandfather, a respected architect of his time, still echoed in her mind. Numbers and strategy belonged to her, hidden under layers of doubt and self-deprecation. She handed off the packages, her heart racing with the notion that she could contribute, yet the self-doubt clawed persistently at her insides. These were professionals. What could she, merely a delivery woman, possibly add to their heated negotiations? Just as she began to step back, words of urgency and desperation spilled over the table, rekindling her father's anxious face in her mind. They need help, she thought, with an unsettling clarity. Without realizing it, she stepped closer. Excuse me, she stammered, her voice barely cutting through the aura of tense mindfulness. The heads turned, polished shoes and designer ties assessing her with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. I might have an idea. Laughter ensued, a dismissive chuckle tinged with condescension. Who was she to inject herself into this high-stakes world? Her cheeks burned. But as the conversation circled like vultures over dead carcasses, her heart pounded. They debated further, frustration layering thick across the room, every attempt grasping for air. Feeling a surge of adrenaline, Sarah thought of those moments with her grandfather's strategies hidden in plain view, the numbers telling stories they failed to see. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determination surged through her veins as the clock ticked relentlessly. Each moment spent watching them struggle mirrored her own internal battle: step forward, offer help, or retreat into the shadows. Uncertainty raged. What if they dismissed her again? What if in trying to stand up, she fell flat, just like countless times before? The air thickened, compounded by the reality of expectations, both external and internal. As she wrestled with the familiar chain of self-doubt, a childhood friend, now head of marketing at a rival firm, sauntered by. Recognition struck her like a shot of caffeine, igniting old memories mingled with lingering envy. He represented everything she had let slip away, dreams stifled under obligations and debts. Yet in that moment, as discussions grew more intense and the clock slipped to critical hours, she resisted the urge to retreat. Could she break free? Could she prove that true value often lurked beneath surfaces polished by social expectations? Her body trembled slightly as she processed the intense confrontation brewing within. The urgency echoed against her ambitions, rising like a glass tower under construction, a chance to leave behind the hesitation that weighed her down. Would she reveal her hidden strategy before the deal slipped into the void? Her fate, like theirs, hung by a thread, ready to bridge her past with her future. With a deep breath, Sarah forced her legs to carry her closer to the conference room. The hum of animated voices and darting hands highlighted her hesitation. A single glance at the digital clock on the wall sent her heart racing. Time was slipping away, just like her opportunities. She could practically hear her grandfather's voice, each word fueling her courage, weaving through the tapestry of doubt. "The bold create their own paths," he would say. "Excuse me," she repeated, this time louder and steadier than before. The laughter faded, discomfort washing over the room as the professionals turned their full attention to her. "I know about the situation. There's a way to structure this deal that could minimize risk. If you allow me to share my thoughts, I promise they're grounded in logic and market trends." The silence felt heavy. Sarah sensed the weight of judgment in their stares. She couldn't falter now. Glancing at the marketing department head, a face she once admired but now felt a pang of rivalry towards, she mustered every ounce of determination and began. "Let us analyze the financial forecasts as they stand," she urged, pulling from her memory the numbers she had tracked for years while managing deliveries. "I've seen what similar contracts have yielded based on the current economic climate. If we increase the initial investment but stagger the payments over a more extended period, it cuts down on initial overhead, making it more appealing to both parties." The marker hovered in her hand as she pointed at unseen projections only she seemed to envision. Glances flickered between the team members, a blend of skepticism and curiosity sparking in their expressions. She could see them processing, the fight draining slightly from their postures, allowing space for her ideas to breathe. One partner, eyeing her with an undetermined expression, cleared his throat. "Have you worked on deals like this before?" he challenged, his arrogance simmering just below the surface. "No, but I've delivered far more than packages in my life," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her candidness. Each word punctured through the air around them. "I listen to clients, analyze their needs, and understand market behavior. The deal hinges not only on numbers but on shared vision and trust. That's what I can offer." The room quieted, choked on her vulnerability, yet within it, Sarah felt a shift. The power of her own voice began carving a new narrative, every syllable an act of defiance against the whispers of doubt trailing her. "Can she substantiate this?" the marketing head asked, eyeing her intensely. It was a challenge, one that ignited a firestorm of resolve in her gut. "I can." She mustered a confident smile, even as her insides churned. "Let me present some data I've collected. It reflects what's happening in the market, how other companies have navigated similar contracts." As she pulled out her notebook, the gravity of her surroundings sank deep. No longer just a bystander, she was an integral part of this critical moment. Adrenaline surged as she leveraged her street-honed instincts. She wasn't just delivering packages today, she was delivering insights rooted in years of observation. While flipping through the pages, she sensed the team's skepticism transform into intrigue. Their body language began to soften as they whispered among themselves, brainstorming pathways with her suggestions. The air was thick with possibility. But Sarah still could not shake the shadow of doubt. The childhood friend, with his successful career staring back at her, planted seeds of worry. Was it too late for her? "Focus," she reminded herself. This was her chance. The clock ticked ominously, counting down moments she could not afford to waste. To validate her worth in this high-stakes conversation, she needed to push past the barriers of self-doubt. The memories of her father's struggles blended with the excitement of opportunity, creating a potent cocktail of guarded ambition. What if she could actually influence the outcome? As she continued presenting her research, the conference door slid open suddenly, disrupting her thoughts. A new face entered, an imposing figure from upper management. Their presence shifted the dynamic back to the brink. "We need to finalize this deal now," the executive announced. Panic reverberated through the room. Sarah's pulse quickened as the opportunity she had fought for drew perilously close to slipping through her fingers. Would they actually embrace her input in front of this new authoritative presence, or were her bold claims about to be dismissed as a fleeting distraction? With her heart racing in synchrony with the ticking clock, Sarah had one choice left. The stakes had never been higher. The weight of expectation hung thick in the air, suffocating yet electrifying. Sarah's palms were clammy against her notebook as she took a steadying breath, fighting the urgency that gripped her heart. The executive's arrival had thrown her into uncharted waters, yet every instinct told her to harness the momentum. "Can we take a moment to evaluate her suggestions?" one of the partners urged, the spark of intrigue not yet extinguished. Sarah seized onto his words, mentally recalibrating as the executive surveyed the room, curiosity etched on their face. "You have the floor," the executive said, gesturing towards her, a subtle invitation layered with challenge. "Thank you." Her voice sounded steadier than her insides felt. "As I was explaining, the real value comes from understanding how the market has responded to similar contracts. Let us break it down." With calculated movements, she turned to her pages, laying out graphs and statistics that illustrated pricing models from recent industry deals. This represents how front-loading investments can create higher risk. However, by staggering payouts, we can accommodate cash flow fluctuations, benefiting both parties more equitably. The hushed murmur from the assembly grew as they leaned forward, the executive's expression shifting from skepticism to thoughtful examination. "You mentioned trust. This is a relationship business. How can you assure both sides feel secure?" Sarah's heart raced, the question a turning point. "Trust isn't just offered, it's built over time through transparency and collaboration," she replied, drawing from her experiences managing deliveries. "By involving all stakeholders in the process and establishing check-in points, we can maintain accountability and ensure confidence remains high." A nod from the marketing head caught her attention, a small token of recognition that ignited a glimmer of hope within her. What had started as trembling vulnerability now felt like a steady flame of determination burning brightly between them. They appeared to be engaging with her perspective, a palpable shift in the collective atmosphere that she couldn't ignore. But then, she caught sight of her old friend, seated at the edge of the table, his smirk betraying doubt, skepticism etched across his face. Something inside of her snapped. "This isn't just theory. I've seen tumultuous relationships between clients and suppliers crumble under pressure when miscommunication runs rampant. I'm dedicated to bridging that gap." The fierce commitment in her words unveiled a fierce edge, a realization flooding through her. She wanted this, not just for herself but for the value it could create for all involved. Interesting approach. But without experience, can your perspective truly hold up under pressure? He shot back, a deliberate provocation that sent a wave of defiance rushing through her. "I might not have the years of experience, but I have lived through enough on the ground level, facing the pressures you all articulate. I have what it takes," she stated, emboldened by her deep-seated belief that resilience came from every micro-experience that shaped her. The executive's brow furrowed, wrestling with the dichotomy of her lack of formal experience versus her unyielding passion. "We're balancing significant financial implications here." Exactly. Financial stability hinges on a shared vision. I've delivered that vision across countless interactions. This time, let's make it work for both parties, together. The silence that ensued felt infinite, as though time had momentarily halted in its discourse. Sarah's heart pounded loudly, each beat amplifying her fear of being dismissed but also her yearning to be acknowledged. "Get her your data from past contracts," the executive finally said, eyes shifting between Sarah and the partner who doubted her. "Let us see how it stands up." Relief washed over her as she recognized the opening window of opportunity. They were willing to engage. She was being heard. As her teammates scrambled for the information, Sarah felt a surge of energy, a realization igniting within her. This was not merely about negotiations, it was her declaration of self-worth, an assertion that echoed her grandfather's cherished words. The conversation surged forward, guided by the data she had shaped, yet her focus had shifted. Sarah sensed that her journey was transforming, she was no longer just fighting others' doubts, she was actively reshaping her own narrative. As they wrapped up the details, an inescapable tension stirred in her chest. Though the deal was still fragile, her willingness to stand her ground had fractured the barriers of their perceptions. But beneath her triumph simmered a haunting question: could her newfound confidence withstand the scrutiny of the corporate world, far beyond this moment? In that uncertainty, a familiar thought echoed through her mind, urging her to press forward. The battle for recognition was just beginning. What awaited her beyond these walls? With a determined look at the faces of her colleagues, Sarah felt the weight of her journey crashing back into focus. She had come too far to turn back now. What might her ascent mean for the professional front looming ahead? The room buzzed with a newfound energy, but Sarah felt a gnawing insatiability deep within her. The immediate pressure of presenting had ebbed, replaced by an urgent need to transform this transient victory into something more enduring. She watched as her colleagues hurriedly exchanged thoughts about the data, their enthusiasm gathering momentum. Yet, she couldn't shake the image of her old friend's smirk from her mind. The moment had sparked change in the room, but would it ignite real transformation within herself? Returning to her desk, Sarah pulled out her notebook, spilling thoughts across the pages like ink on canvas. The charts and strategies she'd prepared had captured attention, but now she faced an introspective challenge. How could she ensure that her ideas did not simply fade back into the background noise once the executive departed? The what next lingered tauntingly at the back of her mind. Determined to solidify her influence, she dove deeper into research that evening. There was a question creeping into her thoughts: what did it mean to truly assert oneself in a male-dominated industry? Countless stories of women who navigated similar careers flooded her mind, inspiring but daunting. Each narrative contained a thread of resilience, of pushing through barriers, and embodying tenacity. Sarah scribbled ideas alongside reflections of her own experiences, illuminating the parallels and gaps that would shape her approach. The next morning, she bounded back into the office, energy coursing through her. "We've got a follow-up session with the executive next week, right?" she asked a teammate, a flush of urgency in her voice. Confirmation came swiftly, igniting her resolve. She wanted to come in with more than just data, she wanted to present a cohesive vision. "Let's make sure we address the risks moving forward," she suggested, her enthusiasm spilling into their brainstorming session. The partner who once disregarded her looked on with a hint of curiosity, though skepticism remained in his eyes. Sarah forced herself not to dwell on it, channeling that tension into constructive dialogue. She was building something tangible, piecing together not just the financial implications, but the relational ones, educating her team on how trust could be solidified through consistent follow-ups and clear communication. As the hours pressed on, ideas began to crystallize. What if they kicked off the next session by integrating real-life case studies? Illustrating the successes of stable partnerships would offer the executive a deeper understanding of her vision, more than just numbers on a page. The double-edged sword of vulnerability now seemed a tool for engagement. Her experiences, though limited in years, were rich in lessons learned. By the time the workday waned, she had transformed mere suggestions into a compelling narrative, one that wove her authority and authenticity into a single thread. Walking out, she felt the tension in her chest ease. She had taken decisive steps to redefine herself, but not without asking the important question: what if her next steps revealed not just opportunities for her team, but traps of self-doubt threatening to pull her back into anonymity? As she left the office, Sarah's mind buzzed with possibilities. The weight of potential lay ahead, interlaced with the chance to push back against her insecurities. What was at stake, though, was more than just a presentation. It was her chance to fully step into the arena of professional challenge. Striding purposefully down the block, the streets felt electric. Could this new approach be enough to silence the doubts? Were they really ready to embrace a woman who once delivered packages, now armed with insights and strategies? A sudden halt in her steps caught her breath. A reflection mirrored back in a storefront window showed not just a worker aspiring to be heard, but a woman resolutely claiming her right to thrive. The stakes had shifted. ahead lay that defining moment when she would not only seize an opportunity but challenge the very perceptions that had once worked against her. And then, an unsettling realization dawned while she had crafted a strategy for the presentation. How well could she craft a strategy for her own rising tension? With the week ahead pulsing with uncertainty, Sarah knew she had to navigate her inner landscape with just as much vigor as she had for her external goals. What deeper truths about her own capabilities remained unexamined? As the dusk settled, clarity and dread intertwined, leaving her questioning her readiness to confront not just the boardroom but the depths of her own potential. The air was thick with anticipation as Sarah entered the office the following week. The follow-up session loomed large on her mind, the weight of expectation pressing down as she prepared to continue her ascent from the shadows of anonymity. She paced around her desk, fighting the urge to let her anxiety bubble over. There was a choice to be made: succumb to the doubt or ardently embrace the risk of vulnerability. With a new spark of confidence, she connected with her teammates, sharing her latest insights. "We have to present not just the successes but also the struggles," she insisted, her voice steady. "It's vital that the executive sees the challenges we've faced and how we overcame those obstacles. It's part of the narrative." The room stirred with a buzz of agreement, her enthusiasm seeming to awaken a shared urgency among her colleagues. For the first time, their engagement felt like an alliance focused on a collective mission rather than merely presenting reports. However, doubt lingered in her mind like an unwanted guest. Sarah wondered how her colleagues, particularly those in higher positions, would react to her ideas. Did they truly believe in her vision for sustainable partnerships, or would they view her attempts to showcase hardship as a sign of weakness? These questions whirled in her head as she worked late into the night, reviewing case studies and weaving them into her presentation. Straying too far from conventional wisdom felt terrifying, yet remaining static was no longer an option. As each new concept fell into place, she caught glimpses of a hidden confidence within herself, the kind that had long eluded her. The sensation swelled, and she thought back to her initial trepidation, the fear of inadequacy that shaped so many of her professional decisions. It struck her then: she had spent years trying to erase her past experiences as a delivery woman, but each small task she'd completed had honed vital skills for negotiation and resilience. Why not draw from that narrative instead? The morning of the presentation arrived, crisp and vibrant. Stepping into the conference room, Sarah noted her coworkers gathered around, their demeanor ranging from excitement to anxiety. She positioned herself at the front, and, as she began her presentation, she felt energy crackling around her. With each data point, she aimed to take her audience beyond the numbers, cleverly embedding anecdotes from her journey, tales of perseverance that mirrored their current predicament. In the midst of her storytelling, she noticed the skeptical partner watching intently, an altered expression shadowing his previously dismissive demeanor. It was a breakthrough moment. She could feel the shift, the uncomfortable tension morphing into a newfound curiosity. But soon, a sharply critical question pierced through the narrative flow: what if these strategies don't work in real-world applications? What then? The challenge stung, fear clawing at her insides. Sarah took a deep breath, reeling from the temptation to falter. Instead, she engaged instinctively. That's exactly why documenting our struggles is crucial. We can learn from missteps; they offer the data that builds resilience, she articulated, her voice steadying with each word. The discussion that followed shifted from a critical interrogation to a dialogue filled with curiosity and reverberations of respect. Ideas flowed, insights expanded, and Sarah recognized that she was no longer merely a contributor, she was now seen as a thought leader. As she stepped out of the room, adrenaline coursed through her. The presentation might not have been perfect, but she had crafted a narrative that encapsulated not just her ideas, but her essence. Victory danced tantalizingly close, yet swirling in her mind was that same gnawing thought: would this breakthrough sustain her, or was there a deeper vulnerability yet to uncover? As uncertainty loomed ahead, a burning question crystallized: what other parts of her journey were waiting to be revealed, and could they bolster her narrative even further? The Echoes of her former self whispered a challenge: could she face the past she had tried to leave behind to fully reclaim her identity and potential? The morning sun streamed through Sarah's office window, casting a warm glow denoting a day ripe with potential. Yet, as she settled into her chair, apprehension knotted her stomach. The aftershocks of her presentation now hung in the air like an unanswered question. Yes, she had captivated her colleagues. Yes, the skeptical partner had shifted from judgment to interest. But lingering beneath her triumph was a realization that she remained on the precipice of something larger, an exploration of her past she had so long avoided. Determined not to let fear dictate her actions, Sarah reached for her notebook, the one filled with ideas, sketches, and snippets from her life. Each page bore witness to her evolution, intricately tracing pathways from her early days of deliveries to her current role. As she flipped through the pages, she felt a stirring of something deep within. This was a cache of untapped potential, a reservoir from which she could draw resilience and authority. With a newfound resolve, she decided to meet with her mentor, James. He had always brought forth a layer of wisdom masked in humor, pushing her towards a personal growth she often resisted. What's the worst that could happen if I enrolled him in my journey? She thought. After all, he had seen her in her weakest moments and stood steadfast as she unfolded her strengths. James welcomed her with his usual enthusiasm, his office a whirlwind of bustling papers and optimistic energy. "You've been looking sharp lately. Tell me your secret, Sarah," he remarked, settling back in his chair. As she recounted the highs and lows of her presentation, his eyes twinkled with encouragement. "You're not just presenting a narrative, you're laying down the foundation for trust and credibility in the organization. But, my dear, it's time you embrace every facet of your story, even the parts that make you feel vulnerable." His words hit her like a gust of wind reshaping a desolate landscape. What do I truly fear? She pondered silently. Was it the judgment of her colleagues or the sting of memories she thought long buried? "Consider this," James continued, leaning in with deliberate focus. "The delivery business taught you resilience. Every obstacle made you who you are today. Don't shy away from it, integrate it into your leadership style. What's your plan for health and growth in your strategy?" The question ricocheted in her mind, forcing her to confront a tough truth. What would she be without her past? She realized the vulnerability she'd avoided was, ironically, the very source of her strength. With a blend of excitement and trepidation, she disclosed to James her vision of integrating her background into a professional framework. This authenticity could reposition her not just as a leader but as a mentor for those still grappling with their insecurities. As their session concluded, Sarah left with her heart racing, eager to carve a new path that intertwined her past with her ambitions. She understood that her story contained lessons for her team, vulnerabilities transformed into strengths, shaping a narrative worth sharing. However, an unsettling thought gnawed at her as she returned to her desk. What if she invited her colleagues to explore these deeper layers of their own narratives? Would it dismantle the polished image she had endeavored to create, or would it strengthen the connections they had as a team? The weight of that decision loomed large, a tightrope walk between authenticity and vulnerability. That evening, as she wrestled with this notion, she caught herself contemplating her previous fears of judgment. It became increasingly clear this internal confrontation was not just with her colleagues but within herself. Would this exploration bind her to her past, or liberate her to forge a brighter, more connected future? Deep in thought, she resolved to test this theory in the next team meeting. Would they be willing to share their journeys, standing bare before one another? This precise moment felt pivotal, like the tight spark just before an ignition. Sarah understood that to truly thrive, she must cultivate a culture of openness and honesty, starting with herself. As she prepared for the day ahead, a lingering question echoed in her mind. Would unveiling these layers strengthen the bond within her team or fracture the facade of professionalism they had meticulously built together? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting for the boldness to embrace it. The morning arrived with a crispness that felt electric, a tangible anticipation crackling in the air. Sarah arrived at the office, her palms slightly sweaty but her mind firmly set. Today was not just a day for a meeting, it was a potential turning point. As she entered the conference room, she glanced around at her colleagues, each engrossed in their own worlds. Would they trust her enough to strip away the layers of professionalism and share their own personal narratives? Drawing a deep breath, Sarah shifted her focus to the task ahead. She set up the presentation she'd prepared, blending her story into a cohesive narrative that invited others to reflect. A few slides adorned with personal anecdotes complemented professional milestones. She was tentative but ready. She could feel the weight of expectations. This was both an opportunity and a risk. Once everyone gathered, she opened the floor. Thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about success, but I want to tie it to something more personal. She met their eyes, gauging reactions. A blend of curiosity and skepticism met her gaze. This was no ordinary team-building exercise, she was inviting them into the depths of her journey, an unfiltered view of the lessons she had learned. Before I dive in, I need to share a piece of my past, she began. The room stilled, the chatter dissipating. I've spent years in a delivery business, starting at the bottom. Every route taught me resilience. Each word felt like a jump into the deep end, but the silence that followed encouraged her. She pressed on. As Sarah revealed her mistakes, her fears, and the monumental challenges that had shaped her, she saw reflections of understanding in the eyes around the table. It was a catharsis not only for her but for the team. Vulnerability disarmed her colleagues, and she noted the slight shifts in posture, the softened expressions. What I learned, she continued, is that every setback is a setup for a comeback, a lesson in resilience. My unpolished experiences have become the foundation of my leadership. She could see the wheels turning in their minds, hesitation began to fade. Then came the pivotal moment. I invite you all to explore your own narratives, she said, her heart racing. What stories do you carry that inform your approach to work? I believe that sharing these can ignite our collective growth. The tension in the room shifted, folding in on itself as curiosity rippled through her colleagues. A few exchanged glances, unsure yet intrigued. Can we really do this? One colleague finally asked, almost breaking the spell of silence. It was a question that encapsulated a larger fear, the fear of unmasking. Taking that sentiment to heart, Sarah simplified the discussion, breaking it down into small groups. Share one obstacle you faced and how it shaped your professional path. Let us see how our experiences intersect. The applause of vulnerability she had hoped for began. As discussions blossomed, Sarah overheard snippets of stories, tales of professional setbacks, personal hurdles, and the unexpected resilience the group had shown. It became increasingly evident that the deeper they delved, the more unified they grew. Each anecdote layered the room with an energy she had scarcely dared to hope for. But just as she felt herself buoyed by their engagement, a wave of doubt crested in her mind. Was this really the right approach? Would sharing these stories reveal too much? The risk of exposing weaknesses haunted her thoughts. Suddenly, a familiar face across the table caught her eye. Emma, a colleague known for her stoic demeanor, seemed grappled by her own thoughts. Would Emma step up, or would Sarah's outreach reveal fault lines? The tension hung in the air like an impending storm, and Sarah wasn't sure if she was prepared for the vulnerability that might follow. As the meeting continued, a new question emerged in Sarah's internal dialogue. How would she handle resistance from those who might not be ready to peer into their own depths? Would this honesty bolster their team, or expose fractures that could undermine everything she hoped to build? The moment of truth shimmered just out of reach, unyielding and fraught with uncertainty. As connections formed, Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her. She was navigating uncharted territory, and it terrified her in the most exhilarating way imaginable. But what would be uncovered as the layers continued to peel away? The discussion hummed in the air, resonating with a mix of vulnerability and trepidation. Sarah leaned into the chatter, protective of the moment's energy yet uncertain about the repercussions of pushing deeper into such personal territories. She could see Emma, still lost in thought, her expression unreadable, which sparked a flicker of concern within Sarah. What was Emma pondering? Was her quietness a signal of resistance, or was she gathering her courage? As the small groups began to share their stories, Sarah felt both a spectator and a participant in a game of emotional roulette. The air thickened with stories of rejection, misunderstandings, and the fear of failure, each tale acting like a thread in a wider tapestry of shared experience. It was invigorating, yet Sarah couldn't shake the unease that bubbled beneath her skin. Part of her wished she could absorb their pain and triumphs through osmosis and not reveal her own insecurities. She had incited this moment, but was she strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with her colleagues in this revealing dance? As her thoughts spiraled, she caught fragments of laughter and the odd crack of vulnerability, walls crumbling and bonds forming. Still, doubt loomed over her. Then, unexpectedly, Emma spoke. Her voice, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she recounted an early job where she had felt dismissed and unqualified. The room fell silent, all ears on her, pulled into a narrative that unfolded like a reluctant flower blooming. Emma's story leaned tremulously against a backdrop of self-doubt, and Sarah could feel the collective engagement hang palpably in the air. Sarah's heart raced, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between them. Here was Emma, the strong silent type, revealing that even the most composed can wrestle insecurities and fears. Would this increase her standing in the eyes of her colleagues, or would it expose her in ways she wasn't ready for? The small group discussions evolved into a shared vulnerability that transformed the atmosphere. Laughter peppered the seriousness, but at the core, something deeper had ignited. As Sarah facilitated the conversations, she realized she was witnessing not just personal revelations, but a collective redemption, a reframing of who they were as professionals and human beings. But the stakes escalated when a colleague, Raphael, brought up his tendency to overcompensate for fear of inadequacy, causing friction with teammates. His honesty cut through the room, prompting murmurs of agreement and nudging others to unearth their own struggles. Why is this so hard? Sarah thought, her anxiety morphing into a charged intensity. The weight of their narratives was heavy, leaving little room for pretenses. Sarah knew her next move needed to be strategic yet authentic. Would she draw from her own well of struggles to forge a path forward, or would she risk more by offering a culmination of their experiences? What if the truth she shared turned the tide for the group, but at the price of her own comfort? Her breath hitched as she grasped the depth of what was unfolding. As she weighed her options, Sarah's internal compass spun wildly. She felt the urgent need to respond but feared the vulnerability would take her to unexpected places with undiscovered rubble underfoot. Suddenly, Sarah stood taller. "You've all shared profound words," she said, rallying her thoughts. "I need to share my own moment of facing down what scared me most." And with that declaration, she prepared to step into the unknown, feeling as though she was about to unearth not just her fears, but the hidden strategies that could reshape their trajectories as a team. As she took a breath to start her vulnerability journey, a sense of closure hung tantalizingly just out of reach. What truths lay ahead? What consequences would her admission ignite? The moment awaited, tinged with the bittersweet taste of revelation, and Sarah braced for what lay beyond the curtain of her carefully curated professional facade. Would her authenticity ignite further connection, or would it become the expensive gamble that unraveled everything she had worked to build? As Sarah took a deep breath, the energy in the room shifted. The weight of her colleagues' stories loomed large, and for a fleeting moment, her thoughts danced with doubts about the wisdom of sharing her own. Yet, in that collective space of honesty, she felt the potential for growth blossom, an unshakable need to contribute her own truths fueling her resolve. "What scared me most," she began, her voice quivering but steadying with each word, "was the idea that I wasn't enough, that I'd never measure up." A moment of silence followed, the group attuned to her vulnerability. "There was a time when I faced a promotion that felt out of reach," she continued, reliving the scenario that haunted her for years. I was terrified of failing, worried that I would disappoint not just myself but my entire team. As the words spilled out, Sarah didn't just recount the event, she dissected it, meticulously laying bare the fear-driven decisions that had led to missed opportunities. Instead of embracing the challenge, I took a step back. I let fear dictate my actions, and it cost me dearly, both personally and professionally. The room remained quiet, wrapped in her revelation. She could see Emma's focused gaze, urging her on, along with the faint nods of understanding from her colleagues. I remember vividly how I reacted. Instead of seeking advice from my mentors or asking for help, I isolated myself. Sarah's heart raced, but she pressed on, feeling the walls around her capabilities fracture slightly. I've learned since then that true strength lies in vulnerability, in recognizing that we can lean on one another. It's through our fears that we can find our most authentic selves and, ultimately, the support we need to rise. There was a flicker of recognition in the room, a subtle but palpable shift towards a shared understanding. It dawned over her that the very moments of fear she had once cowered from were possibilities waiting to be seized. This collective experience wasn't just about storytelling, it was a tangible pathway to redefining who they could be as a team. Letting go of that fear, actively confronting it, helped me uncover hidden strengths I wasn't even aware of, she concluded, the warmth of hope breaking through the chill of her anxieties. I stand before you now as a far different Sarah than the one who once cowered in doubt. This is a journey, and I'm still learning. In the aftermath of her confession, the energy became electric with possibility. Conversations erupted, more heartfelt stories spilling out. Fellow team members shared insights, questions, and reflections sparked by her admission. Laughter mingled with the authenticity of their struggles, forming connection where there had once been barriers. However, amid the camaraderie that brewed, a nagging uncertainty lurked in Sarah's mind. What ripple effects might her admission provoke? Would her newfound openness lead to expectations she wasn't yet prepared to meet? Deep down, a voice questioned if she had truly shed her anxiety, or merely brushed it aside, waiting to resurface when she least expected it. The notion of accountability weighed heavier than ever. As discussions continued to unfold, Raphael and Emma echoed sentiments of growth and change, each channeling newfound energies towards fostering openness among peers. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the very risk she took by being candid could destabilize the professional facade she had constructed over the years, turning colleagues into allies while rendering her own uncertainties starkly visible. Choosing to step back into the fold, Sarah caught a wisp of ambition ignited within her. She resolved to find a way to harness this newfound momentum, a deeper understanding of herself thriving within the walls of their shared narratives. But just as clarity began to settle, a text pinged in her pocket, an urgent line from her boss that shattered the dynamic tension in the room. Need to talk. Big issue with the Roberts deal. At that moment, an electric jolt shot through Sarah. The time had come to face an entirely different set of challenges, ones that could derail everything she had just worked to build. Her pulse quickened as she wondered what awaited her in this new development. What problems did her boss need her to navigate, and what ramifications would they hold for her evolving role on the team? As Sarah read the message, a wave of apprehension swept over her. The moment of connection she had forged with her team felt fragile, suspended in a balance that could tip at any moment. Her mind raced as she considered the stakes of the Roberts deal. They had invested considerable time and resources into it. Failure could mean the end of all they had worked for in raising their profiles within the industry and solidifying partnerships. Is this about the financial structure I proposed? She wondered. Have my insights fallen through the cracks despite my vocal efforts? The thought clutched at her stomach with anxiety, yet something deeper ignited in her a fierce determination to rally her team and navigate whatever storm awaited them. That can't be right, she murmured to herself, shaking off the remnants of doubt. We have to pull together. A sense of clarity emerged alongside the tension, an urge to lead through potential chaos rather than shrink from it. The shared vulnerability they had just embraced needed to evolve into action, catalyzing into team resilience. Regaining her composure, she turned towards her colleagues. "I just received a message from my boss about the Roberts deal. There's a critical issue, and we need to address it together." The room, once vibrant with connection, shifted back to business mode. Sarah could feel the fire beneath her resolve. "Let us harness the insights we've just uncovered," she proposed, her voice steadying as she gathered momentum. "We all have experiences that can guide us. Let us build a strategy together that reflects our collective strengths." Nods of agreement filled the space, and Sarah felt the energy of her team transform once again, now charged with urgency and determination. "We've spent days analyzing the deal, but it's time to reassess our approach in light of the challenges ahead. Who's in?" Hands shot up around the table, each colleague ready to engage. That flicker of vulnerability, far from stifling their capacity, had ignited a passionate alliance woven throughout their narratives. Sarah led the group as they dissected the problem, delineating potential weaknesses and analyzing solutions, each person contributing their perspectives born from their stories. They explored mitigation strategies, posed new ideas, and creatively envisioned ways to fortify their proposal. Together, they spent hours diving into correspondence and drafting options. Sarah was in awe of her colleagues' talents, no longer hidden behind polished facades. They functioned as a cohesive unit. They shared stories from their own lives, mirroring their experiences in the workplace, retrospectively offering insight into the negotiation tactics that had shaped their professional journeys. As time advanced, so did the sophistication of their strategy. The plan took shape, coherent and fortified by every voice that had contributed. Team members sprung into spontaneous action, ensuring each piece fit in the larger puzzle. And when they submitted the revised proposal to their superiors, something profound occurred. Moments turned into celebration as recognition bathed the table before them. The executive team commended their cohesiveness, highlighting the innovation that emerged from their newfound relationships. "Excellent work, everyone. You've each contributed not just expertise but heart," their executive remarked during the debriefing. The validation reverberated with recognition, reinforcing Sarah's belief that vulnerability and authenticity served as catalysts for remarkable results. Sarah beamed with pride, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment swell inside her. This was a win for connectivity, individual growth culminating in professional triumph. The atmosphere carried a tone of respect, elevating her confidence to new heights. She felt validated not only in her capability to advocate for the team but in her own right as someone who had evolved and was worthy of acknowledgement. However, as the meeting concluded, she reflected on her initial fears of inadequacy. Hadn't this journey dismantled the barriers she once struggled against? While there were challenges ahead, she emerged immeasurably stronger, her identity realigned with a deeper understanding of herself and the wealth of experiences she had to offer. In that moment of closure, Sarah understood she had conquered more than just the immediate obstacles. The journey unlocked the potential within her and reaffirmed her right to take up space at the table. She had grown from a mere observer to an active participant, a resourceful contributor navigating challenges with resilience born from authenticity. Walking out with her colleagues, exhilaration connected them. They had forged something remarkable together, a trust that transcended their professional obligations, a promise to support one another through the complexities of their industry. Sarah's heart was full, knowing that whatever challenges awaited them next, they would face them as a team. This was not merely a success but a metamorphosis. Sarah had evidence that every story mattered. It did not take a polished exterior to find a voice, and through embracing her journey, she had finally built an unshakable foundation of self-worth upon her past experiences. As they exited the building, the golden glow of the setting sun bathed her in warmth. She felt ready to face whatever lay beyond. Before her lay many paths, but she stepped forth with solid confidence, recognized competence, and an established position she had claimed as her own. Now, what steps would she take to consolidate this momentum? With renewed vigor surging in her veins and a vision clearer than ever, Sarah resolved to share her ongoing journey openly because her narrative had the power to inspire transformation. And now, let us not let this moment fade. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice is essential. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support stories that shine a light on personal overcoming.